Environmental Laws in India by Shiva Prasad Bose.
An overview of environmental laws in India. Indian Constitution mentions a few safeguards for environment. There are a number of Indian laws to protect air, water, ecosystems and biodiversity, prevent pollution, prevent wastage and so on. Many of these laws were inspired by international and UN agreements, especially UN Rio Summit of 1992 and 1976 Stockholm Conference on the Environment. Environmental protection in Indian Constitution. Article 21, Protection of life and personal liberty includes the right to a healthy environment. Directive Principles of State Policy Article 48A, mentions the protection and improvement of environment and safeguarding of forests and wildlife. Fundamental Duties Article 51A, to protect and improve the natural environment including forests, lakes, rivers, and wildlife, and to have compassion for living creatures. Forest Conservation Act, 1980. This act restricts the use of reserved forest land for any other purpose, such as by clearing up the forest land. Restricts the reserving of reserved forest land, without prior approval of the central government. Constitutes an advisory committee by the central government for purposes of forest conservation. Declares penalties for contravening the provisions of the Act. Water Act, 1974. Provides for establishment of various statutory boards, namely Central Pollution Control Board, CPCB, and State Pollution Control Boards. Regulates the discharge of effluents and pollutants in rivers and lakes, especially from industrial activities such as factories, by providing standards for such effluents and mentioning procedures to be followed for the analysis of samples for inspection. Provides for penalties for non-compliance. Air Act, 1981. Provides for inclusion of air pollution control in pollution control boards, which are responsible for setting standards of emission from automobiles and industrial plants and can inspect various industrial plants and equipment. It also prescribes penalties for various violations. State governments can designate air pollution areas, in which operating industrial plants cannot be done without prior consent. Environment Protection Act, 1986. Lays standards for emission or discharge of environmental pollutants from various sources. Prohibits and regulates activities in coastal areas and eco-sensitive areas. Procedures for the prevention of accidents which may cause environmental pollution. Procedures for the handling of hazardous substances. Inspection of factory premises. Establishment or recognition of environmental laboratories and guides for pollution control. Forest Rights Act, 2006. Aims to undo the historical injustices to the forest-dwelling communities, ensure their livelihood and food security and strengthen the conservation regime of the forests. This act comes under the Ministry of Tribal Affairs. Establishes the responsibilities and authority for sustainable use, conservation of biodiversity, and maintenance of the ecological balance of the forests. National Green Tribunal Act, 2010. Sets up the National Green Tribunal, a judicial mechanism for speedy resolution of environment-related cases. It has jurisdiction over civil cases that are related to the environment. The remedies it gives can include relief and compensation to victims of pollution, property damage and restoration of the environment. The National Green Tribunal must resolve environmental cases brought to it within 6 months. Wildlife Protection Act, 1972. Imposes restrictions on hunting and poaching and illegal trade in wildlife. Establishes protected areas for wildlife such as sanctuaries, national parks and protected reserves. Constitutes a national board for wildlife. Schedules 1 to 6 contain list of species of animals and plants who are given varying levels of protection, along with penalties for violation. Thanks for listening. Please like and share.